the picture around kind of what it is that the kind of the future looks like around green spaces, around decarbonisation, around our net zero targets is becoming very, very, very slowly, slightly clearer. If we think kind of post COP26, post now, we've got the Environment Act, we've got the Levelling Up papers. So, you know, we're starting to see some tiny baby steps kind of coming forward with this. And certainly the work that we've been doing right across the housing sector, we've certainly observed people are taking different kind of paced steps, I guess, along that journey in terms of, you know, figuring things out. So there is certainly not a complete solution for this. We have got some absolutely wonderful speakers today. Unfortunately, an unnamed virus has managed to get Rob Andrews from Bolton at Home, so he won't be joining us. But we will be hearing from Gavin, Lindsay, John and Sam as we go through today, and I will introduce them as we start. So I should say a little bit of housekeeping. I don't need to go through the whole kind of toilets are down the corridor on the right, which is fabulous. What I should say, though, is if you could keep your microphones on mute, we would love to see your faces on camera. And we are recording the session so that we can just share that a bit more widely. We can get some of the transcripts and things afterwards so that we can share insights and bits and bobs and things. So if you do not feel as though you want to disclose your entire personal life to everybody, please don't. It is being recorded. So why don't we make a start then? And I'm going to come to Gavin Smart, who is the CEO of CIH. Gavin's worked at the NHF. Gavin pretty much knows everything and everybody that there is to know around social housing. So it was an obvious person that we would want to join us today and give us a bit of an overview on kind of where the sector is and some of his observations and insights around that kind of bigger picture piece. Speaking. But hello, Andy, would you mind? That's it. Wonderful. Thank you. So that was a wonderful introduction then, Gavin. But we're honoured to have you here. If you wouldn't, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you, Mia. That was quite the introduction. Whether I can live up to it, we'll find out. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to talk today, because I think you're right. This is a really important agenda, and I think it's probably one where we're all feeling our way a bit. It's certainly not one where I would suggest that I've got expertise, but I can reflect a little bit on some things that I'm kind of seeing and hearing, and maybe how that relates to other challenges that the sector faces as well. Just quickly about CIH, for those of you who don't know, CIH is the Chartered Institute of Housing. We're the professional body for people who work in housing across all tenures and sectors across the whole of the UK and beyond. And my elevator pitch to you would be that we exist to do three things. We exist for our members, to provide them with the information, the services and support they need to do their jobs really well. We exist to train, educate and qualify the housing professional sector, and we exist to be what we call the public voice of housing, which is a reference to the fact that unlike some professional bodies, we actually do policy work as well. And that policy work is very strongly informed by the fact that we've got a royal charter that means we're required to act in the public interest, not simply represent our members. So that puts a kind of particular spin on what we do. Anyway, that's the end of the advertising section. So on to the kind of some thoughts about the kind of green skills agenda. And I suppose it's, as you said in your introduction, Maria, this is still an emerging agenda, and I think we are all still learning and understanding what it is that we need to do. And actually in that spirit, I think probably I'm here as much to learn as I am to speak, but we'll see how we get on. So I guess my take on the bigger picture is that the sector's been preparing for the kind of net zero decarb agenda for a while, and I think is accelerating towards it. But we shouldn't underestimate the scale of the challenge. 4.5 million households in the social housing sector in England alone. There's 27 million homes overall in England. That's a pretty big job. And although we are accelerating, I think it's not yet clear exactly what the path looks like. And we also need to acknowledge that there are some pretty significant headwinds that we're facing as well, which are kind of setting a more difficult context, and probably one that's getting more difficult on a daily basis. So the obvious thing to recognise at this point, I think, is certainly the social housing sector faces some pretty significant challenges for financial capacity. There are already some pretty big demands on the sector's financial strength in terms of investing in existing homes, investing in new homes, service delivery. We've added on top of that now net zero, retrofit, building safety, and some of the quality and condition problems that are getting lots of coverage on ITV and in other places in the media. So there are some difficult trade-offs for organisations to think about. And the advent of a likely rent cap for the social sector is going to make that harder. Savings will be needed. But I guess there is some sort of good news in all the gloom. I should choose my words diplomatically, but I think I want to suggest to you that housing organisations will not be likely to look to exactly the same places to make savings this time round as they looked last time when we faced the rent cut. As that old adage is, marry in haste, repent at leisure. At least some of the problems that we are facing now, I think, probably are the result of decisions that were taken to deal with the rent cut, and we now know more about the long-term challenges that they create. And I think that will adjust the way in which the sector looks at any savings needed as a result of the rent cap, and will probably mean that investment in existing homes, zero carbon, does service delivery, repairs, does better than it might otherwise have done. But we should also be clear, I think, that where the sector traditionally looks to make savings when times get tough is new homes. I don't think savings from new supply will be enough this time round, and lots of organisations are concluding that they're going to have to either slow down or pause their retrofit programs as well. So there's some big challenges there, but we shouldn't be completely gloomy, because there are always ways through, and the sector's pretty adaptable and resilient, and perhaps we'll understand a bit more about what that might look like today. To my non-expert eye, I think we also face some technical challenges too. I don't think we understand exactly everything that we will need to be doing with the homes that we own and manage, and to support the people that live in them. But again, that's not a completely gloomy observation, because I think what the sector's done is it started with what we know how to do, with a fabric first approach, with concentrating on just making buildings perform pretty well. It's very effective. It's fairly well understood. We know what we need to do, and a lot of landlords' net zero programs are starting there and then thinking about the more complicated tech later. We will need to start to do that more complicated stuff soon, and there are some challenges there, I think, in terms of skills, which I'll come back to, in terms of supply chain management. And actually, there's as a professional body, we spend quite a lot of time thinking about behaviours, attitudes, values, and ethics, and I think there's an ethical challenge here as well. We want to be a sector that leads the way and helps the country work out how to resolve this challenge, but we need to do that in a way that balances the interests of tenants and residents. And using really, really untested new technology in homes that are inhabited by people on the lowest incomes feels a little bit like experimenting on them, and we need to be careful, because that's ethically difficult territory. So there's a balancing act that I think we need to be thinking about as part of this agenda. But we would want to lead the way. We are the biggest landlords in the country, we're the biggest property owners. The government is not working with this sector. Who is it going to work with to understand what we need to do? So there's an interesting kind of competing balance there. Without a doubt, the government's taken an interest in this area in its policy framework, but there's more to do. I think there's probably more to do in terms of detail, and there's more to do in terms of the amount of money that they make available. In particular, I'm thinking about things like the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. It's a big chunk of money, 3.8 billion. So old Ronald Reagan quote, billion here, billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. That's a decent chunk of money, but a lot of it is yet unallocated, and the allocation criteria are actually relatively short term. The timescales over which you can bid for funding, and that militates against some of the things that we might otherwise want to be doing. So there are challenges here for government as well about the role that they play. Maybe the Chancellor will cheer us up as he speaks. We'll see. And then moving on to the topic for today, we clearly face some pretty big skills challenges in terms of being able to get the right people with the right ability, the right knowledge to effectively work on this agenda. I was talking to my colleagues who've got more expertise in this space than I have the other day, and they were pointing me to a bit of research done earlier this year by, I think they're called Search Consultancy, they're a recruitment agency, which pointed out that 83% of organisations in the construction sector now report skills shortages. On the recruitment website CV Library, construction vacancies went up by over 200%. Quarter 4 2020, applicants went down by 50%. We've got a problem with construction recruitment and skills generally, and it's particularly acute in this kind of specialist area. Housemark did some research recently around some of the skills gaps. What do they look like? It's things like post-retrofit maintenance skills, the technical monitoring of building performance, people able actually to do carbon literacy training for non-specialist staff and for tenants and residents, green procurement specialists, retrofit client-side management. There is good news. I think organisations recognise that these challenges are there and are beginning to gear up to them. 90% of them have adopted some form of in-house training. 1 in 4 of them were working with contractors to try to fill those gaps. But I guess my kind of general observation would be this is part of a bigger skills recruitment and retention challenge that the sector faces, or put another way, are our old tricks going to get us through this? And I suspect they're not. When Ray and I met earlier on this week, we talked about the fact that, frankly, the way we used to solve these kind of problems was we just nick staff from each other or from other sectors and try to avoid at all costs training our own or doing anything more innovative. I don't think that's going to work this time round. The people are probably not there, and any sector that's got regulatory restrictions on its ability to grow income in the end will lose out in a competition for salaries with those that don't. So we're going to have to do something different. And also, I think we know that we've lost quite a lot of migrant East European labour from construction more generally, and so that's creating gaps too. So one way or another, I think we're going to have to look at how we grow our own. And we can look at training programs to upskill people or to reskill people, move them across. We can look at apprenticeship arrangements, and we can certainly also look actually at how we work with our supply chain, with the contractors that we work with, in terms of levering in skills by working alongside the organisations that we already work with. It's not necessarily the case that all of these people need to be employed by landlords, but one way or the other, either ourselves or working with our contractors, we need to look at how we can lever in skills. As Ria pointed out to me, actually, when we met in Bristol earlier in the week, there are some reasons to be cheerful here. The sector's got a pretty good track record in terms of collaboration, its ability to work in partnership. And I think that means actually working in partnership with contractors, but also with each other. You know, we don't have to do all of this independently. We can come together and look at how we might address some of these challenges collectively. So what about CIH? Well, there is a link here with work that we do, and just some sort of final thoughts about work we've done, some research we've done, and where we've seen interesting developments. We're not a specialist provider of training and skills in this area. It's kind of outside of our remit. So our remit is more to be aware, to signpost, to help to solve collectively. We have developed our professional standards framework, which is a tool for assessing skills, knowledge, behaviours, attitudes, competency, to help people think about CPD. It has as much, I think, kind of efficacy and effectiveness in this space as anywhere else. So it's a way of helping individuals and organisations think about the skills they need, skills gaps, what they might do to fill it. I've talked about our policy work. You know, we'll carry on making the case to government for where we think the policy framework and the investment framework needs to be more or to do different. And importantly, to go back to the rents issue, you know, we'll be responding to that rents consultation. We'll be talking to government about what we think the outcomes ought to be. We'll be talking to them about what we think the mitigations could or should be to deal with the impact on the sector. And that could include an exemptions framework, and it will include pointing out to government that about 2/3 of the savings from any rent cap will accrue to DWP and not to tenants. So government has got a choice about whether or not it chooses to reinvest that money to fill the gap that is otherwise created. And we've also done some work, actually, my colleagues at CH Cymru, CH in Wales, we scoped some of the issues that landlords are thinking about in terms of the green skills needed to hit the decarbonisation target in Wales. We did a survey and some roundtables, and there are some, I think, some important findings, but also some good news in what we learned there. So we learned that already 1 in 4 of organisations have carried out a skills gap analysis, so they're, you know, feel like they're taking the first step. Others will follow, I think. 77% of them had in the last year recruited specifically specialist technical posts to help with the delivery and the management of their decarbonisation work. But without a doubt, it also highlighted that there is real competition for these skills, and landlords are experiencing real recruitment and retention problems. So that's the old nicking from each other, I suspect, happening there as well. There's a big opportunity which we shouldn't miss, and maybe others will pick up on this. Actually, the sector's got quite a good track record of creating learning and skills development opportunities for tenants and residents for using kind of academy approaches, either individual academies or joint academies working across landlords. This is an area that seems to me to be absolutely kind of wide open for that kind of agenda. You could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That's job creation, it's economic regeneration, and it's filling a skills gap. The research was also very clear that the other big potential win is working with contractors to lever in their ability to find people with the right skills, and pointing out to landlords actually that, well, there are things that you can do to make that easier, and actually clear long-term certainty of requirements helps contractors to plan for the longer term. It creates, you know, reliable longer term partnerships. There are things we can do just to send clear signals to the people that we work with. And frankly, actually, just reflecting on the conversation I had with we were in Bristol, we can learn from our contractors as well. You know, we're not always the experts. Quite often the contractors are the experts, and we should be listening as much as telling. The final point coming out of that research actually was the kind of wider carbon literacy point. There is a big need to make sure that our non-technical staff and tenants and residents are trained to understand and to become more carbon literate, and to understand how to use the technology and the changes that we're making to properties. Because otherwise, a lot of the work will go, you know, we tend to be to no avail. If you put stuff in and they're not used properly, you're kind of missing the point. So, you know, in summary, it is a huge agenda. We are still in the foothills. We've got a long way to go. I don't think we know all the answers. So there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot to learn. But we aren't without ideas. We aren't without a track record. It is a skills recruitment and retention challenge, but we've faced them before, and we can look at some of the things that we've done in the past, and we can think about, you know, how we might learn from that to respond. So, yeah, there's as many reasons to be cheerful as there are reasons to get overly depressed. And sessions like today are a really good opportunity to kind of discuss, to reflect, to learn from one another, to build on the progress today, and to think about how we plan for the future. So I started gloomy and tried to end positive. There we go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gavin. That's really helpful. Maybe I can just pick out some of those points as well that really kind of resonated, or some of the bit kind of takeaways for me from what Gavin has said there. I think it's relatively reassuring, actually, when, Gavin, you were saying with kind of, you know, maybe an observation that the sector is starting with what it knows first, that kind of, you know, that fabric first. I think maybe that is reassuring, I think, to me, because we perhaps shouldn't look at it that actually the outside space, outside the home, it's not as though it's being ignored or forgotten. There's a sense of, okay, doing what we know first. And certainly that's what we've seen with ground control, and when we've kind of been working a bit wider across the sector of, actually, it's just really tricky. People are scratching their heads when they come into kind of the outside spaces. And they know, particularly, I think, from COVID, about the value and just how precious it is to be able to go out and use those outside spaces. But actually, we don't have so many of those skills to be able to go, and now we know what to do with them. So yeah, and Sam's going to come on and talk a bit about that. I thought really good point about those kind of the financial challenges, and of course that plays into actually how much airtime this gets, because the financial challenges are particularly acute kind of in one space. But there is a piece, I think, of just reminding ourselves that that longer term, the strategic skills planning that we need is incredibly important, and it doesn't happen overnight. Gavin and I are doing some work with the CIH around this, the importance of having skills on your risk registers. Actually, board and exec should have this really, really at kind of the forefront of their minds, because, you know, those traditional models of just going out and purchasing different skills, that is broken for all sorts of reasons, and that the labour market has fundamentally changed over the past couple of years, and therefore we do need other kind of strategies around that. And then, yeah, I love the learn together kind of piece, and we know that the sector has a long history of collaborating really well. The green, if I could just do a quick plug then on the Green Space Advisory Board, because that's essentially what this is set up for. It's all open source material of what we do. It's 7 housing associations that have come together, sponsored by Ground Control. We've already have a look at it on the website, the Green Space Advisory Board. There's a best practices, there's a portfolio of best practice stuff that you can look through, and we're also developing a green space model at the moment, which will take, anybody can pick up off the shelf, and it will take you through that journey of how to be able to design, maintain, use your green spaces to much better effect. And then also we're thinking about how we can develop the metrics about how you can be measuring the impact of your investment and what you're doing with green spaces. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Gavin. That's great. I'm going to come on to Sam now. Sam is the housing sector lead at Ground Control. Ground Control has been around in housing for many years. Ground Control are a really interesting organisation. Their kind of core purpose, they're a B corporation. They're always way up in Sunday Times top 100 employers to work for. And I think that is because there is such a strong purpose of caring for the environment, and they do that then through grounds maintenance, but that is through all of that kind of skills and expertise of wanting to, you know, what is that bigger picture and what is that kind of purpose and vision things. One of the things that I'm particularly, this is a spoiler of this, I'm particularly keen to hear Sam speak about is what they call their field team model. And in our kind of housing association language, so I used to be in charge of resident employment teams. In our kind of language, what that is that's creating opportunities for people in our communities for employment and to have much kind of greater impact around kind of that employment and in work, you know, kind of better off work as well. So I'm really keen for Sam to be able to share that. Can I hand over to you, Sam?
You absolutely can, and thank you again for a fantastic intro. You've saved me a good 5 minutes there, so thank you. Just sharing a few slides. Don't worry, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Great, excellent, thank you. Okay, so not to duplicate Ria's intro, but just to give some context, I've been in the environmental sector for 20 years, had the pleasure of working in around green space and essentially nature stewardship as well, and that's how Ground Control position themselves in the market as a national business centered around green space development and managing nature recovery. I wanted to give you a bit of a view from the supply chain, where there are a lot of these challenges around green skills and decarbonisation skills sit at the moment. Hopefully give you some takeaways and put a bit more meat on the bones around some of the things that Gavin's already spoken about at a sector level, and on some of the things that Ria's alluded to as well, with the selfish angle of keeping it on point around green spaces, but a lot of takeaways that can extrapolate across the whole green skills and decarbonisation portfolio. And ultimately just to make sure that we keep hammering home the message that green spaces are just as important in this agenda as retrofit and fabric first. So I'll just click through. Right, great. So elevator pitch, quick one for you. And to Ria's point, we are a green spaces and nature recovery centered organisation, but caring for the environment and having green skills has always been at the centre of what we've done for the last 5 decades now, celebrating our half centenary this year. We're carbon neutral, targeting net zero by 2040 to generate leading the way and setting a presence around this and tackling the agenda head on. And our Evergreen Fund is a £5 million impact venture that's been set up to help invest in decarbonisation technologies. So we're putting our money back into the wider agenda, which also includes looking at green skills. We're a great supporter of different nature for networks through rewilding, which is a big agenda, and we're progressing to being a fully electric outfit with our fleet and our tools. Over the last 50 years, we've seen demand on green skills sector accelerate firsthand. We were a £10 million organisation in 2004. We're now a £200 million organisation at the end of this year. And that's despite a period of significant budget cuts from the local authorities and central government with green space management. So we've seen drive through significant investment in infrastructure projects, net zero coming onto the agenda, the Environment Act, which was very welcomed in 2020, which put biodiversity at the forefront. But really importantly, increasing public awareness around climate change, which is really driving this agenda, which is fantastic. And whilst this is an encouraging trend for our planet and for the sector, not just because it produces opportunity, but it is actually putting a spotlight on the subject matter, it does come with massive challenges as a result. So, getting on the front foot with this challenge is vast and complex, but circles for us back to one key pillar that we and the sector should have a view on, and that is that we are only as good as our people are in this area. So we see overcoming the challenge boiling down to three key areas, and through our experiences of partnering with housing providers, we strongly believe that the housing sector is uniquely placed to address the growing green skills gap and empower both frontline staff and residents to become a growing part of the solution. So if I can, I'm just going to focus on those three key areas to hopefully give you some takeaways and some insights from ours. The first is attracting and training new talent. It's the biggest consideration when we think about the rate of scale that's needed. But one key consideration in that is that cost of living is rapidly growing. So low paid but skilled jobs are becoming increasingly harder to recruit as the demand increases exponentially. We strongly believe that to overcome this, we must continue to drive and grow your own culture. So to Gavin's point, but pioneer attractive ways to encourage people into the sector. And this is something that we're doing very actively. So where possible, tapping into and building partnerships with housing providers as a force multiplier for this, and we've got experience of doing that and driving it forward. So taking just three parts to that. First of all is careers advice and work placement, something that the sector's been doing for quite some time, but what we're trying to do is drive the green agenda into that. And so we're making ongoing commitments with housing customers and beyond the sector to promote green skills and help with relevant experience. So we want to make working with nature and green spaces an attractive prospect for the younger generation. It's not always been that, and it's a very challenging one to do, but something we are actively pushing. An example is with L&Q. We're working as part of their Learning to Succeed programme, which gives us as an opportunity as a supply chain to engage with over 30 schools through initiatives such as career networking, work placements and digital masterclasses. Something that's very new to us, very recent, but very welcome, is the Young Darwin Scholarship, which the Field Studies Council have as an initiative they put out, which looks to support placements for students where they have backgrounds that often exclude them from getting involved in their own environmental interests or can't afford to follow their dreams in such a career. And the scholarship is designed to be the start of a career and take them through a journey, educational journey for outdoor and environmental focused career, and we actively are sponsoring 2 placements for that this year with a massive commitment to grow that, and that's something that we've been working with our housing partners to encourage applications into that program through their outreach programs. And then finally, one that isn't new to the sector, has been around for some time, something we've been doing for decades, and that's apprenticeships. And as the markets change on the need is that those apprenticeships adapt. So not only are we working with horticultural and arboricultural and ecology providers to improve the apprenticeship so they are more fit for purpose when we look at things like climate change being more and more on the agenda, we've also been working to develop apprenticeship programs for frontline management staff as well as operational staff. And most recently we've got an intake of 8 graduates onto our contract management program, which has large focus on sustainability and green skills. So all of these examples are prime examples of how the housing sector is perfectly placed to act as a force multiplier with their supply chain, working closely with their contractors and centres of excellence within their own organisations to identify candidates and put those candidates into work. So second then is growing our people to be green. So this is looking at our existing workforce and nurturing staff, in our view, in our world, for nature, but ultimately for green skills. Sorry, pushing through. We know to remain successful, that we also, but also to be a force for good for climate change, we have a massive ongoing task to upskill our frontline staff and our management teams. Equally, we know the housing sector itself has a mammoth challenge around this too. So we are partnering with special organisations such as the Field Studies Council to drive tailored courses for our frontline management teams to help raise awareness and understanding for them, and to make them part of the solution, so they are able to offer the support and advice needed at a local level, rather than relying on the few within organisations that have the existing skill set. Equally, we continue to adapt our formal and bite-sized training for our operational colleagues on the ground, so they continue to have their skills tailored, honed, adapted, and raised, especially when we talk about the subjects like good green space stewardship in an era of net zero and biodiversity gain. And then finally, and potentially most importantly, and relaying back to what Ria said, collaboration is key. And certainly within a sector that has proven collaboration works. So through our sponsoring and working with Green Spaces Advisory Board and the 7 other partners in that forum, we're developing a roadmap, a green roadmap, and a key outtake from that roadmap is to build, it's not just to build and deliver strategies, but to build expertise within organisations at all levels to help tackle this agenda. Again, something that's going to be open source, and we would strongly recommend any other forums tackling green skills or the green agenda to look at it from a similar angle. Again, how better placed is the housing sector than to look at collaboration as a centre point for solving the green skills agenda. So thirdly, and potentially, and certainly coming to Ria's point around some of the things that where we have really been looking to drive change, and when it looks at actually getting the right people into the jobs and keeping them there, is making green jobs pay. And actually changing the norm for the better as to what the existing baselines look like for how people can come into work and how they can be remunerated and succeed. So first and foremost is to raise the bar against market expectations. We are a living wage employer, a real living wage employer, and we're working with the housing sector, certainly with our customers and prospective customers, to make that a mandatory requirement into their procurement processes, so that across the board the bar gets raised at least to a higher minimum expectation. Secondly, we're looking, and we have been for many years, looking to innovate around employment. Whilst Ground Control has a great heritage for a growing your own ethos for directly employed PAYE staff, we have for several decades also developed and supported our people into self-employment, which we called, and Ria's alluded to, our field team model. So if I can just humour me for a second, picture this. You've got James and potentially his daughter, who are conscientious residents and care about their local community, but through current procurement exercises or traditional employment models, they would likely struggle to gain access to bigger, more complex green skills related contracts. Through our field team model, we provide structured selection, training, mentoring, and in many cases financial support to support these people in their communities across the UK through providing green skills based work via hundreds of self-employed teams working in partnership with us as an employer, but most importantly taking pride and improving their local environments that they are then deployed in. In doing so, we continue to provide employment that on average is leaving people 30% better off financially at the end of a year, remains supported and developed throughout what are significant times of change, but importantly provides sustained opportunities leading to retention rates far higher than the industry norms. We pride ourselves on less than a 6% turnover rate with our field teams, compared to an industry average of 25% turnover in staff, which has been going up year on year. In our latest census, we have actually over 80 colleagues working with us in a self-employed capacity who are residents of housing providers across the UK. 65% of those have been with us for greater than 2 years. So that does illustrate the scale of opportunity there. So mandating rates of pay and promoting delivery models that are outside the norms are absolutely channels that the housing sector should continue to promote and reinforce, whether it be through their employment methods or self-employment methods in self-delivery, if they're self-delivering items, or through the excellence that they're trying to deliver through their supply chain. So I'll leave you with 4 takeaways, if that's okay. The first is to use your supply chain as a force multiplier to raise the rate of green skills and opportunities. So really lean on them. Connect your learning and development centres of excellence, so those in your organisations that specialise in this, with your supply chain, especially where there is green skills focus. Collaborate, and collaboration is key to success. You don't have to be big as an organisation to have an impact within a forum, or to warrant taking away your own learnings from engaging with bigger organisations or forums. And please raise the bar with pay and employment models. Look to break the norms and innovate, whether it be through your own methods or you helping with your supply chain. And that's me, Ria.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. That was really, really helpful, and you covered loads there. I really, really love the Young Darwin Scholarship. I'm glad you put that piece in. That's brilliant. Let me just address, and we will have time for Q&As at the end, but it links into kind of what you've just said, some of the bits that are going on in the chat around actually what are green skills. And of course, I think that inevitably that varies according to what each industry needs specifically in order to deliver its kind of green objectives and kind of so. But I do think that it's a really helpful question, Russ, I think, for us to think about putting into the green space model anyway, around actually who are some of the stakeholders, who are some of the decision makers, who are the people that you're going to need to lean on, and some of that will be internal teams, some of that be. I do think though, when we kind of say, so when we have a kind of definition of all of these are the green skills that we would need in order to really successfully use our green spaces, don't necessarily think about you having to have all of those in-house. Because I think that is not going to work in terms of you might need to be able to touch on this type of expertise there and this type of expertise over there. When we've been going through and doing the workshops of the green space model, I think one of the things that has come through really clearly in the partnerships piece is being able to go out and ask for advice and expertise and skills to come in at different points to the journey. So when you reach out in the design phase, when you reach out to the horticulturalist to actually understand what species might be needed for this local environment and that type of thing, it's really important, I think, to reach out and be able to get different types of skills at different points on that journey. And that almost shouldn't be all in-house, because you're really going to want local specific kind of recognition of what those local areas are going to need as well. So without wanting to take up too much time, let me move on then and come to Lindsay Sweeney, who is the Managing Director at Communities at Work. Communities at Work are, they help housing providers to support people to access kind of long-term, it's the rewarding employment bit that we've touched on already. Lindsay is the kind of font of all knowledge around this aspect. I've known Lindsay now for a number of years, so really looking forward, Lindsay, to you giving us some kind of insights around there. And perhaps, if I may, perhaps, just with the levelling up agenda and something, be able to kind of touch on those bits. That'd be wonderful.
Oh, thanks, Ria. You've oversold me there, but I'm going to do my best. It's very nice. It's really nice to see faces here and join us on this green jobs and green skills journey. I'm lucky because I speak third, right? So I've had the chance to hear from Gavin and Sam, and I just wanted to kind of quickly comment, perhaps some takeaway comments from what I heard there. I think Gavin's point about the housing sector stepping up to a kind of academy model, a training model, is a really good one, and something which the sector should take very seriously. That is about partnerships with the adult education budget, learning and skills providers, with suppliers and supply chain, and with our own business and entities. But I'm really pleased to hear that spoken about, and I would fully endorse it. And also, just building on what Sam said, and what I'm going to touch on, the self-employment model, the sort of green jobs model in ground control, I have to say I've been really impressed with in the sort of early knowledge that I've gained of it. We know through our experience of working with housing associations that self-employment and business startup can be a really attractive option for tenants and residents, as well as other types of employment, but it has a particular cachet and interest. And the model that I've heard about in ground control, I think works really well, and obviously has a natural pathway into the business of running a social housing provider. So we're really keen to, be involved in these conversations. And although an academy will be very broad, and some of the chat has talked about, the real range of what we talk about when we talk about green jobs, I do think that you could get an academy model which includes elements of self-employment pathways, of apprenticeship, traineeship, of retraining, new jobs, and everything that's going to be required to meet the approximate 500,000 new jobs in green jobs that the government describes. And the last point on definition, although I did put in the chat box a government definition on green jobs, a few months before that definition, there was a government-led Green Jobs Task Force, and in their final report they said every job is a green job, which is one of the most unhelpful comments you can possibly make about how to think about defining and planning for a workforce. But anyway, they've moved on and been replaced by a different group. But yeah, so we are all sharing a little bit of that frustration in terms of definition, and how do you sort of capture that and work on it. Okay, so I will be brief, and I don't have any slides, so I'm just going to try and talk about just a few key things. So, a little bit about where we are on the government agenda, including levelling up, some of the opportunities in UK SPF, and I think the big picture for social housing. So Ria's already said that we're Communities That Work. We're a membership body. We've got about 1.5 million homes in our membership across England. We've got some of the largest, some of the specialists, and some of the oldest. So we've got all sorts of members. You can see them all on our website. We've been around for about 12 years now. So we're relatively young in the membership bodies for social housing, but work very well and collegiately with all the other main trade bodies. And we do a lot of work jointly with them on social housing and employment, which is our specific and our only area of interest. So obviously everything about green jobs and good green jobs is of real. What we try and do is link housing and employment and government together. So we are a policy influencing organisation where we use our members' intelligence to inform our parliamentary work. We do a little bit of research, some with other trade bodies, NatFed and NatFed Almos included. And we use the information from our own members, but also across the broadest sector that we can gather and garner, to make the case always that social housing is absolutely vital to community regeneration and employment and skills plans, if any government at any level is serious about engaging with longer term unemployed people. And we advocate very much for the specialisms and expertise and skills and experience of the sector in direct delivery in that space, but also in partnership. So our ability to partner with other specialist organisations, the training provider, adult learning sector, through our supply chains, the levers that can be pulled there. So we're trying to sort of build up the pace that social housing and the sort of objectives of regen and boosting the economy can't be done without social housing. So it's really interesting times, and sort of reflecting on what Gavin was saying about where the social housing sector is in this whole green revolution, which is the new industrial revolution, which is just about beginning in this country at this time. There are many sort of ways of looking at it, but in a sort of fairly recent forum with some chief execs in the Northwest, we did reflect that there's a bit of a twin track at the moment on the green jobs revolution in this country, and it's a little bit split by wealth and earnings, and touches on something Gavin said about who's in the room, who's the guinea pig. If you're on the sort of transport and car side of green energy, looking at an electric car, you are in a wealthier household, right? No doubt about it. That is not happening at the poorer part of this country at the moment, but it's going at pace in, Planet Tesla and Golf IDs and all the rest of it. And they cost a lot, and they are not a decision that a lower income household is making. a bus and a train might be decarbonising and going net zero, but in terms of private transport, a bicycle is about the greenest, and not, transport of old called green. So there's a whole growth in green transport and car ownership. And then there is homes and insulation, and the massive journey that this country needs to make on insulating our homes and being more efficient. And I'm interested about what levers the government has and what cards the social housing sector has to play. Because unlike the electric car, we are at the front of the queue on the decarbonisation of homes agenda. No doubt about it. The private rented sector will probably be last, and owner occupiers will go if they are pushed or they are incentivized to decarbonise and insulate their homes. They won't go in any other way. And the government can't control them so easily. So social housing has a voice and has a perspective, and certainly has a hand to play with government. And the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund is part of that, making that work. It is a significant sum of money. It's deemed to be, almost like it's like you've paid the tip rather than the bill for the government. So it's about 5 to 10% of what is estimated to be needed to decarbonise our homes. However, it's a start, and it must be successful. It must be made to work in social housing. And ideally, the technology will be right first time, but there is a risk in this that, we are going first. So, this ages me hugely, but are we about to buy Betamax when a VHS is 1 year away from us? This is a real concern in the sector. Are we going to buy old technology the moment we've installed it? It's gone, it's out of date. However, I'm not sure we have much choice. I'm not sure we can simply stop the wheels turning there. So we've got to do the best we can, and green skills and proper installation and behaviours in our homes really matter. And we are going to learn first as a sector. So I don't think we've got a huge amount of choice in that, but there is some real opportunity to bring the funding available and the skills gaps that we know exist together, and create more and better opportunities for our own social housing tenants and residents and communities to get those opportunities to train, to retrain, reskill, start again, start for the first time, but get new green jobs. They are real, they're going to happen. We've got to make them actually appear. We've got to commission that work. We've got to create training pathways with training partners. All of these things require practical decisions to be made. And I have to say, there is a little bit of fuzz from the government about licenses to practice, what type of standards will be mandatory, what types will be optional. It makes it very hard to plan when there's a lot of flux in that market. So we do make demands on government to be clearer about that. So in terms of, big government, I just wanted to mention a group which exists. It's been around for less than a year. It's called the Green Jobs Delivery Group. And it's important. It's cross-departmental. It's DWP, BEIS, Department for Education, and I think DEFRA are in there too. Obviously, it has new ministers in place now almost across the board. It's set up in May, but it's largely controlled by BEIS, so Jacob Rees-Mogg's newest toy. And we're going to see, we've spoken to them recently. We understand that they are serious about continuing, and they are looking at cross-departmental opportunities to create green jobs. Their target is basically 500,000 jobs by 2030. They've got 8 years less to get that sorted out, and they are behind, but they are there. So we have advocated for the social housing sector to have a seat on that group. It's not masses of people, it's about 30 or 40 organisations. Big industry is in there, trade unions are in there, academic and learning and skills providers are in there. We really think social housing needs to be in there, and we've made that representation to BEIS, but we'd be very happy to have other housing partners make that case as well. So we think that's really important in terms of getting the levers of government working around social housing and understanding the importance of the fact that social housing is going first in this agenda, and they can't do it without us. So that's really important. And I'll touch briefly on two quick things about sort of learning and skills and opportunity. We know, and the DWP knows, that there is not an unemployment crisis at the moment in this country. Employment is at record high levels, and you know, you can touch any newspaper or news item and you'll hear that. It's like, oh, great, job done, tick. However, there is a massive economic lack of participation crisis, right? So there is a major and persistent and growing workforce participation crisis, which means that there are millions of people of working age in this country who, for many reasons, are far away from the labour market. And of that portion of people, there is a fair estimate that many, so this is about a 30 or 40% of those, want to work, just need a bit of extra support to work, and are not being reached by DWP or JCP. Many of our members, the work they're doing is with that cohort of people across our communities, right? And they're doing it long term. They're making good commitments to work with people and households, and they are moving people on and through and into new opportunities and new life chances. That happens day in, day out, by the hundreds and by the thousands in the social housing sector. But the scale of the issue is such that we need to do a lot more, and we cannot do that alone. That must be in partnership with government and with local authorities and lead authorities. So although the funding is very modest in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, right, which is a small pot of money owned by DLUC and distributed to local authorities, it is the replacement fund for European funding and social funding, and it will ramp up over the years to come to, you know, about £1.5 billion a year, which isn't a lot, but especially when you spread it out, but is something, and it can be used at a local level, which is where housing operates best, to support strengthening it. Right, the rules are different in different parts of the country, but in England, on people and skills, the old traditional ESF funding, you can't do that for the first 2 years. All right, so those kind of job ready employment programs, they can't exist till year 3, which is 24-25. But in the first 2 years, they're very explicit that what UK SPF can do is strengthen local entrepreneurship, support new businesses to start, sustain, grow, innovate, network. They talk about training hubs, business support hubs, those old kind of business centres, advice centres coming back. And they also talk very explicitly about any activity that supports decarbonisation and improving the natural environment whilst growing the local economy. So DLUC and BEIS behind it sees a very clear connection between economic growth and green jobs and improving our environment. And we should too, you know, getting right on that is difficult, but we should see it too, and social housing should be at the front of that opportunity. So although we don't control UK SPF, we do have partnerships and opportunities with local lead authorities. That might be a mayor or combined authority, it might be a district. If it's certain types of funding around adult learning and numeracy, it's at county level. So it's a little bit confused. But if you are a social housing provider, you will have some local connections to local authorities. I would urge you to go out and make friends with your lead authorities on UK Shared Prosperity Fund and ask them where they are up to in their plans. So they've all had to submit plans on UK SPF. They are all at DLUC now. There's about 222 of them. They will all get signed off, pretty much rubber stamped through, and be sent back to local areas to enact, to make good upon. So there is time now to have those conversations and understand, put the case for what social housing can do, our track record and expertise in supporting people into work, and also our interest in the local environment, on green jobs, on linking business startup with decarbonisation in local areas. So we should be on the front foot for that. And it's something that no national body of any size can do, actually. It's got to be local. It's got to be your relationships that make that work. So the power is with you on this at this point in time. And we will carry on fighting the good fight to get social housing on that Green Jobs group, and continue to make the case throughout Parliament and through parliamentary contacts for the role of housing in this space. So I think that's all I want to say. I'll happily take any details or questions or follow-up conversations after this. And I will, if you don't mind, I hope it's relevant, to put a thing in the chat box just to an upcoming event on good green jobs, which we're running later in October, which I hope is relevant to some guests here. So I'll drop that in the chat box as well, and it's free to register, of course, so everyone is welcome. Thanks, Ria.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I'm going to refrain from doing kind of summary. I learned a lot from that, but I'm going to refrain from doing a summary bits because I'm going to hand straight through to John so that we do try to save a bit of time for Q&As. So John, I'm going to be heavily reliant on you, I'm afraid, to try and keep some of that time towards the end, if that's okay. Therefore, without further ado, let me introduce John Westby, who is board member at Green Skills Partnership. The Green Skills Partnership is a network to develop skills solutions. It's bridging the gap between kind of social exclusion and the skills shortages within industries. So, we were really, really keen to ask John to come along and talk a bit about that. Can I hand over to you, John? If we have John. Can you hear us, John? Right, we might have more questions and answers then. No, I think we might.
It seems John has dropped.
Have we lost John?
The chat. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. Well, why don't we do questions and answers? Let's do a Q&A piece now. And if John does come back to us, oh, what a shame, then we can go through and do that. So, Lindsay, thank you very much, therefore, for kind of rounding that bit off. We've had a number of kind of points and questions and bits in the chat already. Let's go through. Does anyone want to stick their hands up if they wanted to ask any questions of the speakers so far? Don't be shy. Sam, can I ask on behalf then? Sam, can I come to you on this piece around, because we've talked about this a fair bit within the workshops, haven't you? This piece around actually what are the green skills that we're talking about that are needed in order for us to successfully kind of do the best that we can with our green spaces?
Yeah, and I think this is a good point, because in different worlds, green skills mean different things, and acknowledging green as the decarbonisation agenda more broadly, there are many roles and responsibilities within that. Looking at it specifically within green spaces, we can divide it into sort of three distinct categories, really. The green skills are the ladies and gentlemen on the ground delivering green space stewardship, or installing new green spaces, the operators, as some may want to call them, delivering the work. Green skills are definitely needed there, because we're going beyond the realms of it something just being functional. There's a larger picture at play as to what their skill sets need to be, and how they tackle the agendas around good stewardship of the land they are maintaining or installing, and doing it in line with best practice and legislation. The second is then what we call a technical green skill. So people that are coming from a technical, potentially postgraduate background, looking at things like ecology, biodiversity, landscape design, consultancy-based type green skills, where there's someone who very implicitly understands the technical requirements in order to deliver against an outcome. And then you've got the more holistic management of estates, of estate management programs, and what that looks like over a life cycle. So people that can see look at it from a bigger picture perspective. Certainly when we talk about dovetailing development in with ongoing maintenance of green assets, and management that can take the projects through that journey. So project and contract management. They're the key three areas that certainly we're focusing on as an organisation, and those that where a lot of time, effort, money, and devotion is being spent into upskilling and recruiting in the right areas.
Thanks, Sam. And I guess if we're being kind of precise, I guess, about this, there's a difference, isn't there, between skills and knowledge. And I guess the bit that I kind of chipped in with earlier is just knowing which piece along the journey of what you're doing with your green spaces, that actually it might be knowledge that you just need to go out and seek at that point, isn't there? And that there are a whole load of agencies, volunteer groups, organisations, all sorts of people that you can easily go out and identify, can't you? And we've seen lots of people kind of doing work, people particularly that we have been talking to around Green Space Advisory Board. So, for example, Orbit are doing some awesome work with the Wildlife Trust. you guys with the field council, you know, there's as well as then lots of kind of local volunteer groups that have got specific different types of knowledge that perhaps wouldn't necessarily fall naturally into those three groups that you said, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from people? Caroline.
Oh, hi. So a lot of the stuff I've heard today has been sort of like quite high level. And what I'm really interested in, we have lots and lots of schemes where we have residents that just want to be involved. So, and for us, we're quite risk averse. I mean, I know everyone's a little bit risk averse, but I'd like to know about the kind of models where we can kind of reward people for their input, if you like, in a more structured way, and we're able to pay them in a structured way, whilst also not leaving them with the liability. So you're talking about self-employment, but I'm also thinking about health and safety, liability in case something goes wrong, but we want to utilise people that want to work with us. And what's kind of the best model to do that?
Sam, can I ask you to maybe cover that off, particularly from maybe some of the things that we've been learning from different housing associations and some of the stuff that they're doing, yeah, when we're looking at some of the best practice stuff that we've been doing?
Yeah, sure. And it's something that has been a large chunk of what the Green Spaces Advisory Board has been doing, certainly what we do as a contractor in this space. But certainly with Green Space Advisory Board has been looking around the resident engagement piece. And there's a whole separate module that we're working on around that, not just with the Green Space model. And getting quite granular about it. You're right, there are certainly definitely things that we need to be conscientious around when we're talking about putting people to work on the ground, or ultimately getting involved with things like plant equipment, tools, use of chemicals, etc., whatever it might be that is stewarding green spaces. And the answer to that is it really depends on the desires of those of the local entities, the local communities, that what they want to achieve. If it's that they want to earn an income, and it's simply that they just want to look at availability of opportunity, then absolutely we can look at well, we do it with our customers, looking at an employment opportunity program, and that takes people through the journey, potentially through an apprenticeship or initially with work placements, takes them through to an employed status. And again, our field team model takes that a step further, where people are really interested in self-employment, and it takes them on that journey to be self-employed and delivering those skills. If we're talking about them just wanting to get involved and engaged and potentially have a bit of an income as a result of some efforts, and look at that, there are various modules, so various opportunities to look at. One is that you can have paid work placements. That is one thing to look at. You can have projects that have a paid outcome, so a specific project where we're looking to, and there are organisations out there that specialise in this. Greenworks is one of them. They do a lot of work around sort of generating income for people who want to get involved in this area, but don't necessarily look at it as a career. And that is a project-based outcome where individuals go in and they get paid to deliver a project, which usually has a community benefit around it, and that pay will be factored into how it is funded, whether it be central funding, localized funding, business funding it through various streams. That is definitely one step. The other is to look at income generation from using the products that are installed or used. So food generation is one. We're in an era where sustainability is really high on the agenda. I know Clarion do some really great work with as community projects they have, where they have community gardens that generate produce, that generate income. So those are projects that definitely can be looked into. At all stages of those, it requires different individuals from different organisations coming together to make those happen. So it's all about connecting the dots with those. There is no just off-the-shelf product that you can plug and play. It's about engaging the local communities and understanding what skill sets you have certainly within your neighbourhood teams, to be able to enable these projects.
Thanks, Sam. I might ask Lindsay as well to come in if you've got some bits on that. Can I just reflect whilst Lindsay's preparing her thoughts, now that I've come to her with no warning, of Caroline, there was just some interesting, I guess, contributions when we've talked around this before from a cultural aspect to within communities, of actually different people expect to use their kind of communal green spaces in quite different ways. And you've got some who see it quite often as a primary use of play, perhaps, but others, the primary use would be food production. as Sam just alluded to. And so it's quite interesting actually of drawing upon those different kind of, with multicultural kind of very diverse communities, with being able to draw on all of those, particularly if you're doing it around that kind of local engagement, which is going to have some really, really wonderful and really, really kind of rich kind of outcomes about being able to use the space in such different ways. Lindsay, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'm happy
On
to.
Caroline's.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was aware I'd sort of spoken a bit long anyway, so I cut myself off and wanted to mention a really practical sort of example of a large-scale self-employment model that Optivo in the south of England have been doing. But there are many examples that all of our members in one way, shape or form create opportunities for tenants and residents, be that a direct job, a traineeship, a work placement, an opportunity to work through the supply chain, or a self-employment course. All those things are made available to varying degrees and advertised locally. And I'm aware, of course, of some of the issues around data protection and outreach and legitimate use of customer data. But advertising generally, broad brush around these opportunities, is still quite an effective way of reaching out to communities and tenants and residents. And word of mouth is also really effective. So if you start with a small group on opportunity and encourage people, if they've had a good experience, to talk about it to their friends and family and neighbours, that works. That happens and creates footfall for new opportunities. So really kind of, at ground level, door to door work is effective in terms of creating opportunities. And as businesses in social housing, we have to make a decision to create those opportunities. That's a straightforward business decision, and one that we can do with skills and learning providers. You don't have to feel that you'll need to be the expert on everything here. There are partnerships you can develop to get this off the ground fairly. And you can talk to your local job centre pluses. They have a really mixed reputation, but they are stacked full of employment advisors and coaches, and you can reach out to them, let them know that you're interested locally in providing opportunities, and get their counsel on how they support people. So I've mentioned all of those. In terms of Optivo, they in particular it was actually a group of HAs across the south of England, and they focused on self-employment support and programs and opportunities, but also provided employment and training and wider opportunities. And that's been going for about 4 or 5 years now. It's European funded, so it will come to a close. But their latest sort of stats, which were shared with me last week, show that they've engaged about 9,000 people across that project. 1,300 have started a job or training or a business as an outcome, which is fantastic. 4,000 have received money advice, just considered life options, and had their incomes boosted as a result of that engagement on money advice. They've had really high rates of engagement with Black and minority ethnic communities. So about 80% of all customers who've come through that programme are from Black and minority ethnic households. And they've got a 98% customer satisfaction rate on Trustpilot. So, that kind of very standard way of receiving quick feedback. So although it's only one example, and we will feature it in a masterclass in a few months' time, and there's a lot to learn from that, just about basic engagement and how you make a program work and how you develop it at scale. And they're not doing it alone, they're doing it with partners across the housing sector. So it's just one of many, but it's a good and recent example that's reporting soon on how you actually do it, how you make those first steps. It's very doable. It can just feel a bit overwhelming, but honestly, just with a few steps and a few opportunities, start there and go from there.
Thank you, Lindsay. What I might do then is just ask our speakers just to perhaps give us maybe 30 seconds, maybe one or two things that they've just kind of taken away from today. Sam, can I start with you? Put you in the hot seat.
And that's fine. And selfishly, being from the supply chains perspective, I'll make it supply chain centric. And to one of Gavin's opening remarks, really, don't be afraid to engage a supply chain as agenda. Put the onus on the supply chain, who ultimately have a lot of these challenges trying to adapt. A majority of those supply chains will have challenges going across multiple sectors. There's cross pollination, excuse the pun, of ideas and solutions to come to bringing better green skills agendas. So whether it be at procurement level or with your existing suppliers who are showing degrees of innovation around this kind of thing, really engage with them, whether it be to Caroline's point on a local issue that they want to deliver a project, or is it more whole scale about generating jobs more broadly across important gender?
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam. Gavin, can I come to you?
Thanks, Ria. So just some quick thoughts of things that I've learned. So I think what's been really interesting today is that we've already established there's lots of different ways around the problem, and that's good. You know, and Sam is right to make the point again about it doesn't have to be all your effort. You can lean on your supply chain. You can look at your expectations there, and actually, the more you plan to do something, the more likely you are to succeed. So some of it's just about a bit of thinking, a bit of planning. But for me, the second thing is I thought that discussion around the degree to which you can create employment opportunities for tenants and residents, this is really interesting. And just a sort of side note that, of course, there's quite a lot of experience of doing that in the sector in other areas. And one of the things that we all need to be aware of is making sure we don't, to use a technical phrase, knacker up people's benefit entitlements, but we do know how to manage around that. But it's an important little wrinkle of detail that we need to be thinking about. And then the third thing was I did think our discussion around definitions of green jobs, green skills was really, really interesting. I found myself in two completely different camps on it. So one, it was fascinating and technically really interesting. And the other, I found myself thinking actually a little bit sort of along the lines of kind of Malcolm X, actually what really I think at an organisational level, what are green skills, green jobs? Well, I suspect actually they're whatever it is that you need to do to get the job done, to get to the commitments that you've made in terms of net zero carbon. And connecting that to the search standards framework, actually that's about a bit of self-interrogation about saying, so what do I understand about the skills and the knowledge that I need or we need to get this done? You know, where can I learn it? How much do I need to lean on other people? It's really useful to know that government's got a definition and a strategy that works around it. That's helpful, but at the end of the day, what really matters is what you need to do to get the job done.
Lovely. Thank you, Gavin. And I'm very, very conscious of time. Sorry, Lindsay. 30-second takeaway from yours.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I'm heartened that some parts of the sector are looking at their skills gaps. And I agree with you, Ria, that it should be on a risk register now. So they're my takeaways, actually. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Dennis, I will come to you, but for those people that just need to kind of drop off, can I just say a public, really, really massive thanks, both those to attending today, but also to the speakers as well who have devoted their time. Really, really massive thanks. I've certainly learned lots, and thank you for Ground Control for hosting. People, do feel free if you need to drop off, but Dennis, go on, last year you've managed to sneak your hand in the very last minute. Go for it.
I was just interested when you were saying you were about planting more food supplies in the landscape, and whether we should be trying to tie up with the social enterprise networks that collect food, such as the Abundance Network, and that, you know, because there is a lot of apathy. So you set these things up, but if it's not getting picked, we're creating a problem. But if we tie in with charities and other organizations to use that food, then that all ties in with social housing. We can project that, it can supply the food banks and all this type of stuff. But it's all about networking, isn't it? And connecting these things up so it becomes then relevant in everyone's lives. We can see that, you know, we're organizing things a bit better.
Yeah, there's a lovely circle there, isn't there, of kind of design, resident involvement.
I was interested when Sam was mentioning that, putting sustainability and I think that will bring in people love things for free and things that are healthy, and it seems a sensible circle to try to build, because I've had councillors and things like that asking me why I can't plant more trees and bushes in the parks and things like that. So yeah, it's an interesting topic.
It is, and that kind of usage, and I think where you also go and what the other links are around kind of community places, we will most certainly kind of flesh out and put together in the green space model that we're doing as well. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, and apologies a couple of minutes over. So thank you so much for your time. Have a lovely weekend. It's the end of the week almost. Have a lovely weekend, and thank you once again for coming. Take care. Bye.